Last Halloween, I stood in my kitchen watching my two girls dump their trick-or-treating haul onto the dining table. Mountains of chocolates, lollies, and sweets cascaded everywhere. And instead of sharing their excitement, I felt this knot in my stomach. That familiar voice in my head started, "This is too much sugar. They'll be bouncing off the walls. Their teeth will rot. I need to hide half of this." Sound familiar? We were raised in the sugar is the enemy generation, weren't we? Where sweets were rationed, hidden, or used as rewards for good behavior. But here's what I've learned from speaking with registered dietitians and childhood nutrition experts. That approach we grew up with is actually creating the very problems we're trying to avoid. Today, I want to share a completely different, research-backed approach that lets you enjoy Halloween without the stress, the guilt, or the food battles. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how to break the cycle of food restriction for your children and help them develop a healthy relationship with all foods, including sweets. So let's be honest about where this fear comes from. Most of us grew up in households where certain foods were labeled good and others were bad. Sugar was definitely in the bad category, wasn't it? Our parents meant well. They were following the nutrition advice of their time. But think about the messages we absorbed. You can't have dessert until you finish your vegetables. Sugar will make you hyper. Too many sweets will make you fat. That's just junk food. These weren't just casual comments. They shaped how we think about food today. They created this moral hierarchy where eating kale made us virtuous and eating chocolate made us weaker, undisciplined. I'll be brutally honest with you. I still battle with this. Even as someone who's researched intuitive eating extensively, I catch myself having thoughts like, I shouldn't be eating this when I reach for a biscuit, or feeling guilty when I enjoy a slice of cake at a birthday party. That's the legacy of diet culture, and it runs deep. Halloween amplifies all of these anxieties. It's like every fear we have about sugar gets magnified. Suddenly, our homes are flooded with exactly the foods we've been taught to fear and restrict. The very foods we've been telling ourselves and our children are sometimes foods or treats only for special occasions. And then the mum guilt kicks in. We start questioning everything. Am I being a bad parent if I let them eat whatever they want? What will other parents think? Should I be counting how many pieces they've had? What about their health, their teeth? Are they going to develop bad habits? Here's what I want you to know. These feelings are completely normal and valid. You're not alone in having them. Every parent I've spoken to about this topic has shared similar concerns. We're all just trying to do our best for our children with the information and experiences we have. But what if I told you that the very strategies we think are protecting our children, limiting sweets, hiding them, rationing them, might actually be creating the problems we're trying to prevent? What if the restriction itself is what makes sweets so appealing and creates this obsessive behavior around them? The research shows us something fascinating. Children who grew up with unrestricted access to all foods, including sweets, actually develop better self-regulation skills. They're more likely to eat a variety of foods and less likely to binge or obsess over particular foods. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it makes sense when you think about it. When something is forbidden or scarce, it becomes more desirable. That's basic human psychology. Think about your own relationship with food. Are there certain foods that you find yourself thinking about obsessively? Foods that you either completely avoid or tend to overeat when you do have them? I'm willing to bet those are foods that were restricted or demonized when you were growing up. This is what diet culture has done to us. It's created this all or nothing mentality where we're either being good or being bad with food. There's no middle ground, and unfortunately, we're passing this on to our children without even realizing it. But here's the thing. We can break this cycle. We can choose a different path for our kids. We can help them develop a relationship with food based on trust, body awareness, and joy rather than fear, restriction, and guilt. It starts with understanding that food is just food. Sweets aren't evil. Vegetables aren't virtuous. They're all just different foods that serve different purposes in our bodies and our lives. This Halloween, instead of seeing it as a threat to your child's health, what if you saw it as an opportunity? An opportunity to help your children learn to trust their bodies, to experience different foods without shame, and to develop the kind of food freedom that many of us are still working towards as adults. Right, let's talk about what the science actually tells us about children and sugar, because there's this massive gap between what we've been led to believe and what the research shows. First, let's address the elephant in the room. Will one day of eating lots of sweets harm your child? According to registered dietitians and pediatric nutrition experts, the answer is a resounding no. As dietitian Sarah Haas points out, Halloween only comes around once a year, but cultivating a healthy relationship with all foods is a year-round strategy. One day of increased sugar intake won't derail your child's health, create diabetes, or cause lasting damage to their well-being. But here's where it gets really interesting. The research consistently shows that restricting access to certain foods, especially sweets, actually creates the very behaviors we're trying to prevent. A landmark study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that when children's access to palatable foods was restricted, it significantly affected their behavioral response, food selection, and intake patterns. In other words, restriction made children more obsessed with those foods, not less. Think about this for a moment. When we tell children they can only have 2 pieces of chocolate, or that sweets are sometimes foods, we're actually making those foods more psychologically powerful. We're teaching them that these foods are special, scarce, and therefore more desirable than anything else. Alyssa Rumsey, a registered dietitian and author of Unapologetic Eating, explains it perfectly. This is biological. We are wired to react to any type of restriction with increased cravings and binge-like behavior. It's not a character flaw or lack of willpower. It's literally how our brains are designed to respond to scarcity. The research also reveals something crucial about how morally labeling foods affects children. When we call certain foods bad, unhealthy, or junk, children don't absorb these labels about the food. They absorb them about themselves. As therapist Alexander Altman notes, this can shame kids for loving lollies and really normalize it, when the truth is it's just a food that happens to have sugar in it. Children haven't developed abstract thinking yet, so they take these moral judgments literally. If chocolate is bad and they love chocolate, what does that make them? If eating sweets makes someone naughty, then they must be naughty for wanting them. This creates shame around natural desires and normal eating behaviors. Now let's talk about children's natural ability to self-regulate, because this is where the research gets really fascinating. Multiple studies show that when children are given unrestricted access to a variety of foods, including sweets, they naturally respond to their body's hunger and fullness cues. They eat a variety of foods, including fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and yes, sweets too. A nutrition expert and mother discovered this firsthand when she stopped restricting her children's Halloween sweets. Instead of the chaos she expected, she found that by the end of the week, more often than not, they were over it. The novelty wore off when the scarcity was removed. This connects to what pediatric dietitians call the forbidden fruit effect. When something is off limits, it becomes infinitely more appealing. But when that same thing's readily available and normalized, it loses its special power. Children naturally move on to other foods and activities. The biological response to restriction is particularly important to understand. When we restrict certain foods, our bodies interpret this as a potential famine situation. This triggers increased cravings, thoughts about the restricted food, and when we do get access, a tendency to eat more than we normally would. It's a survival mechanism that survived our ancestors well, but in our current food environment, it creates problematic eating patterns. What about the myth of sugar addiction in children? The research is clear. Sugar doesn't create true addiction in the clinical sense. Yes, sweet foods can be pleasurable and children naturally prefer sweet taste. This is actually an evolutionary advantage that helped our ancestors identify safe, energy-rich foods. But this preference doesn't constitute addiction. Registered dietitian Katie Sullivan Morford puts it beautifully. Being overly restricted with Halloween lollies only makes kids want it more and creates unwanted drama around food. The drama, the obsession, the sneaking behavior, these aren't caused by the sugar itself. They're caused by our response to the sugar. Here's what multiple dietitians and feeding experts agree on. Children who grew up with food neutrality, where no foods are forbidden or placed on pedestals, develop better long-term eating habits. They're more likely to eat intuitively, less likely to binge, and more capable of self-regulation throughout their lives. Another pediatric dietitian reminds us that restricting lollies on Halloween, creating strict lolly rules, or labeling sweets as bad usually backfires. Kids can become lolly obsessed and sneak it or feel ashamed when they will eat it. The research consistently points to one conclusion: trust works better than control. When we trust children to listen to their bodies, when we provide variety without restriction, when we remove moral judgments from food choices, children naturally develop healthy eating patterns. This doesn't mean abandoning all structure or boundaries around food. It means shifting from external control to supporting internal awareness. It means helping children tune into their hunger, fullness, and satisfaction cues rather than overriding them with own fears and restrictions. The science is telling us something revolutionary. The very thing we're almost afraid of, giving children freedom around sweets, is actually the path to the healthy relationship with food we want them to have. Let me share something personal with you. When I was about 8 years old, my mum used to hide our Halloween lollies on top of the fridge after we'd been allowed what we could have that day. I remember laying in bed at night thinking about those lollies, not just wanting them, obsessing over them. I'd plan elaborate schemes to get to them. I'd stand on chairs, climb on benches, or try and convince my mum to give them to me. One afternoon, when mum was hanging washing out, I finally managed to get up there. And do you know what I did? I didn't just take one piece. I ate as many as I could, as quickly as I could, terrified she'd come back and catch me. I felt sick afterward, but more than that, I felt this crushing shame. I was a bad kid who couldn't control herself around lollies. That memory stayed with me for decades. Even now, as a grown woman, I sometimes catch myself eating chocolate too quickly with that same panicked feeling as if someone might take it away from me. That's the power of childhood food restriction. It doesn't just affect what we eat, it shapes how we feel about ourselves when we eat. I'm not alone in this experience. Nearly every woman I've spoken to about this topic has similar stories. Maybe your parents threw away your Halloween lollies after a few days for your own good. Maybe lollies were locked in a cupboard and only brought out for special occasions. Maybe you had to earn dessert by finishing everything on your plate first. These weren't cruel parents, they were loving parents doing what they thought was best. But here's what we now understand about the psychology of restriction. When something is limited or forbidden, it becomes infinitely more desirable. It's called psychological reactance, and it's a fundamental part of human nature. Think about your own relationship with food as an adult. Are there certain foods that you find yourself thinking about obsessively? Foods that you either completely avoid or tend to overeat when you have access to them? I'm willing to bet those are the same foods that were restricted or demonized during your childhood. For me, it was chocolate and biscuits. For years as an adult, I couldn't keep them in the house because I'd eat the entire packet in one sitting. I thought I lacked willpower or self-control. What I actually lacked was the opportunity to learn that these foods could be ordinary, everyday choices rather than forbidden treasures. This is what dietitians call the restriction binge cycle, and it's incredibly common among adults who grew up with food rules. We restrict certain foods because we don't trust ourselves around them. But with the restriction itself is what creates the lack of trust in the first place. It's a vicious cycle that can persist for decades. Registered dietitian Abby Sharp explains this beautifully. When we use Halloween lollies to build trust, role model a neutral approach to sweets, and support a child's ability to self-regulate, we strengthen our kids to make healthier choices for themselves as they grow. The key word there is trust. We have to trust our children to learn, even if that learning involves some uncomfortable experiences. But here's the thing that really gets me. We're not just passing on our food restrictions to our children. We're passing on our food anxiety, our shame, our complicated relationship with eating. Our kids are watching us. They're absorbing not just our rules about food, but our emotions around food. When we say things like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this, or I'm being so bad today, or oh, I'm going to have to go to the gym tomorrow to work this off, our children are learning that food comes with guilt, shame, and punishment. They're learning that their bodies can't be trusted, their eating for pleasure is somehow wrong. The research on this is quite confronting. Studies show that children as young as 3 can develop body dissatisfaction and disordered eating behaviours when they're exposed to diet culture messaging. When we make moral judgments about food, children internalise those judgments about themselves. But here's what's particularly insidious about the forbidden fruit mentality. It doesn't just make restricted foods more appealing, it makes them psychologically powerful in a way that undetermines our children's natural eating instincts. When sweets are special, scarce, and emotionally charged, children lose touch with their body's natural signals about hunger, fullness, and satisfaction. Instead of eating sweets because they taste good or because their body wants something sweet, they eat them because they might not get another chance. Instead of stopping when they've had enough, they keep eating because who knows when the next opportunity will come. This is exactly the opposite of the intuitive eating we want to foster. I see this pattern playing out in so many families. Parents restrict sweets during the week, then allow unlimited access on weekends or special occasions. The children go wild on the allowed days, eating far more than they would if sweets were just a normal part of their food landscape. Then the parents see this behavior and think, see, I was right to restrict them. They can't control themselves around sweets. But the lack of control isn't caused by the sweets themselves. It's caused by the restriction. It's a predictable response to scarcity, not evidence of addiction or lack of willpower. Many of us are still battling these patterns today. We're adults who can't keep certain foods in the house, who eat secretly or shamefully, who swing between restriction and overindulgence. We're living proof of how childhood food restriction affects us long term. The good news is that we can break this cycle. We can choose a different path for our children. We can help them develop food freedom, the ability to eat all foods without guilt, shame, or loss of control. But it requires us to confront our own food baggage and make some brave choices about how we want to approach feeding our families. This Halloween, we have an opportunity to do things differently, to show our children that sweets can be enjoyed without drama, without guilt, without complicated rules, to help them maintain their natural ability to self-regulate rather than teaching them to override their body's wisdom with external controls. So what exactly is intuitive eating, and why are dietitians around the world advocating for it when it comes to children? Let me break this down in simple terms that make sense for busy mums like us. Intuitive eating is essentially eating based on your body's internal cues rather than external rules. It's about trusting your hunger, respecting your fullness, and eating foods that satisfy you without guilt or shame. It sounds almost revolutionary in our diet-obsessed culture, doesn't it? But here's the beautiful thing. It's actually how we're all born to eat. Think about babies for a moment. When a baby is hungry, they cry. When they're full, they turn their head away from the bottle or push the spoon away. They don't count calories, worry about portion sizes, or feel guilty about wanting milk at 2 a.m. They simply listen to their bodies and respond accordingly. This is intuitive eating in its purest form. Every single child is born with these incredible internal mechanisms. They have hunger cues that tell them when they need food, fullness cues that signal when they've had enough, and satisfaction cues that help them know what types of food their body is craving. It's actually quite miraculous when you think about it. Their bodies are perfectly designed to regulate their food intake. But somewhere along the way, we start interfering with these natural processes. We tell children to finish everything on their plate, even when they say they're full. We offer dessert as a reward for eating vegetables, teaching them that some foods are more valuable than others. We create eating schedules that might not align with their natural hunger patterns. Slowly but surely, we teach them to ignore their body's signals in favor of external rules. Research consistently shows that children who are allowed to maintain their natural eating instincts, who are supported in listening to their hunger and fullness cues rather than having them overridden, develop healthier relationships with food long term. They're more likely to eat a variety of foods, less likely to overeat, and more capable of self-regulation throughout their lives. Now I know what you're thinking, but won't they just eat sweets or forever if I let them choose? This is probably the most common concern I hear from parents, and it's completely understandable. We've been conditioned to believe that children can't be trusted around certain foods, especially sweet ones. But here's what the research actually shows us. When children have regular, unrestricted access to all foods, including sweets, they naturally eat a varied diet. The key word there is regular. When sweets aren't special or scarce, they lose their psychological power. They become just another food option rather than the forbidden treasure they must be consumed immediately and in large quantities. Pediatric dietitian Sarah Remmer puts it perfectly. Since sugar isn't a forbidden food, it makes eating it less of a big deal. When we remove the moral judgments and the scarcity around certain foods, children naturally self-regulate. They might eat more sweets initially, especially if they've been restricted before, but this typically balances out within a few days or weeks. The beauty of intuitive eating is that it's not just about food, it's about building trust between children and their bodies. When we support children in listening to their internal cues around food, we're teaching them that a skill that will serve them throughout their entire lives. We're helping them develop body awareness, self-trust, and the confidence to make decisions based on their own needs rather than external pressures. This body awareness extends far beyond eating. Children who learn to tune into their physical sensations around food also become better at recognizing other body signals when they're tired, when they need movement, when they're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. It's all connected. But intuitive eating isn't just about individual health outcomes. It's about breaking free from the diet culture that has caused so much damage to our generation. When we raise children who eat intuitively, we're raising children who won't spend their adult years battling food guilt, shame, and obsession. We're giving them the gift of food freedom. I want to be clear, though, about something. Intuitive eating doesn't mean complete chaos or lack of structure around food. As parents, we still have important responsibilities. We decide when meals and snacks are offered, where eating happens, and what foods are available. But within that structure, we trust our children to decide whether they eat and how much they eat. This approach requires a fundamental shift in how we think about our roles as parents around food. Instead of being food police, monitoring, controlling, and restricting, we've become food providers and supporters. We offer variety, we model healthy relationships with all foods, and we trust our children's internal wisdom. The long-term benefits of this approach are profound. Adults who ate intuitively as children are more likely to maintain stable weights, have better mental health around food, and enjoy eating throughout their lives. They don't spend their days thinking about what they should or shouldn't eat. They simply eat when they're hungry, stop when they're full, and choose foods that satisfy them. This Halloween, we have a perfect opportunity to support our children's intuitive eating abilities. Instead of seeing it as a threat to their health, we can see it as a chance for them to practice listening to their bodies, to experience different foods without shame, and to learn that they can trust themselves around all foods, even the ones we've been taught to fear. Now that we understand intuitive eating, let's talk about how to actually implement it in real life. This is where Ellen Sater's division of responsibility comes in, and it's honestly been a game changer for how I approach feeding my family. Ellen Sater is a registered dietitian and family therapist who spent decades researching how to feed children effectively. Her division of responsibility framework is beautifully simple. It clearly defines what parents are responsible for and what children are responsible for when it comes to eating. And the research backing this approach is extensive. Here's how it works. As parents, we have three main jobs. First, we decide when food is offered. This means establishing regular meal and snack times that work for our family schedule. Second, we decide where eating happens. Maybe that's at the dining table, or perhaps you're more relaxed about location. The key is having some structure. Third, we decide what food is offered. We're the ones doing the shopping, the meal planning, the cooking. That's it. Those are our responsibilities. We don't decide whether our children eat, and we don't decide how much they eat. That's their job. Your child's responsibility are equally clear. They decide whether they want to eat what's been offered. They might choose to eat everything, something, or nothing at all, and that's completely okay. They also decide how much to eat. They might have a tiny portion one day and go back for thirds the next day. Again, that's their choice to make. This might feel terrifying at first, especially if you're used to monitoring every bite your child takes. But here's what's beautiful about this approach. It removes the power struggles around food. No more battles about finishing plates. No more negotiations about just 2 more bites. No more bribing with dessert to get vegetables eaten. When we apply this framework to Halloween sweets, it looks quite different from the traditional approach. Instead of rationing 2 pieces per day or hiding the stash and doing it out gradually, we make the sweets available alongside other foods and let our children decide whether and how much to eat. This might mean putting some Halloween sweets in a bowl on the counter where they're easily accessible. It might mean including sweets at an option at snack time along fruit, crackers, or cheese. The key is making them ordinary rather than special. I remember the first time I tried this with my daughters, I was absolutely convinced they'd eat nothing but chocolate for a week. But do you know what happened? After the initial excitement of having free access, they started making really balanced choices. They'd have a few pieces of chocolate, then ask for an apple. They'd eat some lollies at morning tea and then want a proper lunch. The practical application looks different for different ages, of course. For toddlers, you might put a small bowl of sweets on the table at mealtimes and let them choose whether to eat them. For older children, you might want to have a family discussion about where the Halloween haul will live and how it fits into your regular eating routine. The beauty of this approach is that it builds confidence in our children. When we trust them to make food choices, we're sending a powerful message. I believe you can listen to your body. I trust your instincts. You're capable of making good decisions for yourself. This trust is crucial for long-term healthy eating. Children who grow up feeling trusted around food and are more likely to maintain that self-trust as adults. They're less likely to develop restrictive eating patterns or to swing between extreme control and complete chaos around food. But let's be practical about implementation. This doesn't mean throwing all structure out the window. You still decide when the kitchen is open for eating. You still provide balanced meals and snacks. You still model healthy eating behaviors. The difference is that within the structure, your child has autonomy over their own intake. For Halloween specifically, this might mean having a conversation with your child about how sweets fit into your family's eating routine. Maybe sweets are available at snack times. Maybe they're offered alongside dinner. Maybe your child gets to decide when they want to include them in their day. The key is removing the artificial scarcity that makes sweets so psychologically powerful. Some parents worry that this approach is too permissive, that it's somehow neglecting their responsibility to ensure that their child eats well. But actually, it's the opposite. By trusting our children's natural eating instincts and providing structure without control, we're setting them up for a lifetime of healthy, intuitive eating. The division of responsibility works because it honors both the parent's role in providing and the child's innate ability to self-regulate. It removes the emotionally charged from eating and allows food to be simply food. And when it comes to Halloween lollies, it transforms what could be a battleground into an opportunity for learning and trust building. This approach requires courage, patience, and a willingness to let go of control. But the freedom it creates for both parents and children is absolutely worth it. Right, let's talk about the actual night itself. Halloween night, when your children come home with bags full of lollies and you're standing there feeling like you're about to lose all control. This is where the rubber meets the road, where all the theory we've discussed gets put into practice. Here's my approach, and I'll be honest, it felt terrifying the first time I tried it. After my daughters finished trick-or-treating, instead of immediately implementing damage control, I sat down with them at the kitchen table. I said something like, right, let's see what treasures you've collected. Tell me what's your favorites. We spread everything out. They told me stories about which houses gave the best sweets, and I genuinely engaged with their excitement. Then came the moment of truth. Instead of saying, you can have 2 pieces and then we're putting the rest away, I said, you know what? Tonight's special. You can eat as many sweets as you like from your collection. The look on their faces was priceless. Part excitement, part confusion, like they were waiting for the catch. Now I know what you're thinking. She's lost her mind. Her children are going to eat themselves sick. And you know what? One of them did feel a bit queasy that first year. But here's the thing. That uncomfortable feeling taught her more about listening to her body than any lecture from me could have. This approach works because it removes the artificial scarcity that makes sweets so psychologically powerful. When children know they can have more tomorrow, when they're not worried about sweets being taken away or rationed, they naturally start paying attention to how the food makes them feel. They begin to notice when they've had enough, when their tummy feels full, when the sweetness becomes less appealing. Registered dietitian Barbie Savoni shares similar observations. Allowing them to have regular access to sweets when it's around takes away the novelty, and they will be less likely to overeat it at parties or when they are not in your presence. The key phrase there is regular access. When sweets aren't special or forbidden, children naturally self-regulate. But let's address the elephant in the room. What if your child does eat too much and feels unwell? First, resist the urge to say, I told you so, or this is why we have rules about sweets. Instead, this becomes a valuable learning opportunity. You might say something like, oh dear, your tummy is not feeling great, is it? Sometimes when we eat lots of sweet things, our bodies let us know that they've had enough. What do you think might make you help you feel better? The language is crucial because it helps children connect their eating choices with how their body feels without shame or judgment. They're learning that their body gives them information and that information is valuable and worth listening to. This is body awareness in action, the foundation of intuitive eating. Some children might surprise you entirely. I've heard countless stories from parents who expected chaos but found their children naturally moderated their intake. One mum told me that her 7-year-old ate 3 pieces of chocolate and then says, I'll save the rest for tomorrow. My mouth feels too sweet now. That's self-regulation happening in real time. The language we use on Halloween night matters enormously. Instead of warning about sugar crashes or tummy aches, we can use natural observational language. How does that chocolate taste? What's your favorite so far? How's your tummy feeling? These questions encourage body awareness without creating anxiety or shame. It's also important to address safety considerations without eating food fear. Yes, we need to check sweets for tampering or choking hazards, especially for younger children. But we can do this matter-of-factly. Let's have a look through these to make sure they're all safe for you to eat. We're not saying sweets are dangerous, we're being sensibly cautious. For families with food allergies, Halloween requires extra vigilance, but this doesn't mean creating fear around food. You might say, we need to check the ingredients on these to make sure they don't contain anything that makes your body feel unwell. It's about safety, not moral judgments about food. And what about the practical logistics? Some families find it helpful to have eaten a proper dinner before trick-or-treating so children aren't ravenously hungry when they encounter their sweet haul. Others prefer to let their children eat sweets first if that's what they want, trusting that they'll eat other foods when their body asks for them. There's no single right way to do this. The key is approaching it with trust rather than fear. Trust that your child's body has wisdom. Trust that feeling too full or too sweet occasionally is part of learning. Trust that children naturally seek balance when they're not fighting against artificial restrictions. I want to share something that really shifted my perspective. A pediatric dietitian once said, we spend so much energy trying to prevent our children from ever feeling uncomfortable around food that we rob them of the opportunity to learn from their bodies. Sometimes feeling a bit sick from too many sweets is exactly the lesson a child needs to develop better self-regulation. This doesn't mean we want our children to suffer. It means we recognize that mild discomfort is sometimes part of learning. Just like we don't prevent our children from ever falling when they're learning to walk, we don't need to prevent them from overeating when they're learning to self-regulate. The beauty of Halloween night is that it's a contained experience. It's one night of the year when the normal rules can be suspended, when children can experiment with food freedom in a safe environment. The lessons they learn about listening to their bodies, about satisfaction and fullness, about making choices without external pressure, will serve them far beyond just managing their sweet intake. This approach requires enormous courage from us as parents. It goes against everything we've been taught about responsible parenting around food. But when we can let go of control and trust our children's innate wisdom, magic happens. We're not just managing Halloween sweets, we're building the foundation for a lifetime of healthy and intuitive eating. So Halloween night has passed. Your children have had their sweet adventure, and now you're looking at the remaining lolly stash wondering, what on earth do I do with all this? This is where many families fall back into old patterns, hiding sweets, rationing them out, or creating elaborate reward systems. But let's talk about a completely different approach that keeps the magic of food freedom going. The key to managing the post-Halloween period is making sweets feel ordinary rather than special. I know that sounds counterintuitive when you're staring at bags of chocolates and lollies, but bear with me. The moment we start treating these sweets differently from other foods in our house, we're back to creating this artificial scarcity that makes them psychologically powerful. Here's what this looks like practically. Instead of hiding the lolly stash or putting it somewhere special, consider incorporating sweets into your regular meal and snack times. The goal is to normalize these treats so that they become just another food choice rather than the forbidden treasure they must be consumed immediately. When sweets are offered alongside other foods regularly, children naturally start making balanced choices. They might have a piece of chocolate with their lunch, then choose fruit for their afternoon snack because that's what their body is craving. One mum I know puts her children's Halloween haul in clear containers in the pantry, right next to the crackers and the fruit. Her children can see their sweets, access them during designated eating times, and gradually work through them over several weeks. She told me that by removing the mystery and restriction, her children actually forgot about them for days at a time. Something that never happened when the sweets were hidden and rationed. But let's address the special occasion mentality that can sabotage our efforts. Many of us grew up believing that sweets were only for birthdays, holidays, or as rewards for good behavior. This creates a scarcity mindset where sweets become emotionally charged rather than just another food option. When we only allow sweets on special occasions, we're teaching our children that these foods are more valuable, more desirable, and more powerful than everyday foods. Instead, we want to create what dietitians call food neutrality. This means that whilst different foods have different nutritional profiles, no food is morally superior to another. A chocolate biscuit isn't bad and an apple isn't good. They're just different foods that serve different purposes in our bodies and our lives. This shift in thinking can be challenging for those of us raised in diet culture. I still catch myself thinking thoughts like, oh, they've had too many sweets today, or they should eat something healthy first. But when I notice these thoughts, I try to refrain them. Instead of too many sweets, I might think, I wonder if they're still hungry for other foods. Instead of something healthy first, I might offer a variety of options and trust them to choose what their body needs. The beauty of this approach is that it removes the drama from food choices. When sweets aren't special or forbidden, children don't feel the need to negotiate, sneak, or overeat them. They become just another food, another option in a varietied food landscape. Let's talk about dental health because I know this is a major concern for many parents. You can absolutely address oral hygiene without demonizing sugar. You might say something like, sweet foods can stick to our teeth, so let's make sure we brush them well tonight. Or, after we eat sweets, it's good to have a drink of water to rinse our mouth. This is practical health information without moral judgment about the food itself. Some families establish a routine where teeth get brushed after eating sweets, regardless of the time or the day. This creates a practical boundary around dental health without restricting the food itself. Children learn that they can enjoy sweets and take care of their teeth. It's not an either-or situation. Language remains crucial during this post-Halloween period. Instead of asking, how many sweets have you had today? Try, how's your tummy feeling? Instead of saying, you've had enough sweets, try, what else sounds good to your body right now? These questions encourage children to tune into their internal cues rather than relying on external rules about how much is appropriate. What often happens with this approach is that children naturally moderate their sweet intake over time. The initial excitement of unrestricted access gives way to genuinely body awareness. They start noticing that eating lots of sugar makes them feel sluggish or unsatisfied. They begin craving other flavors and textures. This is self-regulation, developing naturally without external pressures or control. Remember, we're playing the long game here. The goal isn't to manage this year's Halloween lollies perfectly. It's to help our children develop healthy, sustainable relationships with all foods that will serve them throughout their lives. Common fears and how to navigate them right. Let's address the fears that are probably swirling around in your head right now. Because if you're anything like me, you're thinking, this all sounds lovely in theory, but what about when it goes wrong? Let's tackle these concerns head on with some practical strategies. Biggest fear I hear from mums is, but what if they only choose sweets when they're given freedom? This worry is so understandable, especially when we've been conditioned to believe that children can't be trusted around certain foods. Here's what actually happens in most cases. Children might initially eat more sweets than usual, particularly if they've been restricted before. But this typically levels out within a few days to a couple of weeks. Their bodies naturally start craving other foods, other flavors, other textures. They get bored with sweets when they're no longer forbidden. If your child does seem to be choosing sweets exclusively for longer than expected, it's worth examining whether there's still some scarcity messaging happening. Are the sweets truly accessible and ordinary, or do they still feel special sometimes? Sometimes we think that we're offering food freedom, but we're unconsciously creating restrictions through our language or our energy around certain foods. Then there's the partner problem. My husband thinks I'm completely mad for letting them eat unlimited sweets. This is incredibly common, especially when one parent grew up with stricter food rules than the other. The key here is having honest conversations about your family's food values and the research behind intuitive eating approaches. Share some of the dietitian quotes and studies we've discussed. Sometimes it helps to frame it as an experiment. Let's try this approach for a month and see what happens. If your partner remains resistant, you might need to find a middle ground that feels comfortable for both of you while still moving away from restriction-based approaches. Perhaps that means offering sweets alongside meals rather than unlimited access throughout the day. The important thing is that you're both working towards the same goal of helping your children develop a healthy relationship with food. Social pressures from other parents can be particularly challenging. When you're at a playgroup and other mums are talking about hiding Halloween sweets or rationing them out, it can make you question your approach. You might hear comments like, "Oh, you're so brave letting them eat whatever they want," or "I could never trust my kids with that much sugar." Remember, these comments often come from their own food anxiety rather than judgment about your parenting. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your feeding choices, but if you want to share, you might say something like, "We're trying to help them learn how to listen to their bodies," or "The research on food restriction really opened our eyes." Keep it simple and confident. If you're concerned about your child's overall nutrition, focus on what you're offering rather than what they're choosing. Are you providing regular opportunities for nourishing foods? Are you modeling a positive relationship with all foods? Are you creating pleasant eating environments? These factors matter far more than controlling specific food choices. Extended family can present particular challenges, especially grandparents who might have very different ideas about appropriate sweet consumption. Before family gatherings, you might have a gentle conversation about your approach. We're working on helping the children learn to self-regulate around all foods, including sweets. It would be really helpful if you could avoid commenting on how much they're eating. What if your child asks for sweets at every meal? This often happens initially when children are testing whether the food freedom is real or whether restrictions will suddenly reappear. Stay consistent with your approach whilst maintaining appropriate boundaries around timing. Sweets are available at snack times this afternoon. Maintain structure without creating artificial scarcity. Remember, some of these challenges are temporary adjustment periods as your family adapts to a new way of thinking about food. Trust the process, trust your children, and trust that building a healthy relationship with food is worth navigating those initial bumps in the road. Right, let's get practical. Because understanding the theory is one thing, but knowing exactly what to say when your child is reaching for their fifth piece of chocolate, that's where the rubber meets the road. I want to give you specific language that builds body awareness without judgment and help you recognize the phrases that might be sabotaging your efforts without you even realizing it. Let's start with how to talk about Halloween treats in a neutral way. Instead of calling sweets bad or unhealthy, try describing them factually. This chocolate is sweet and creamy, or these lollies are crunchy and colorful. You might say, all foods do something for our bodies. Sweets give us quick energy and taste delicious. This removes moral judgment while still acknowledging that different foods have different roles. When your child is exploring the Halloween stash, use curious language rather than controlling language. Instead of don't eat too much, try how does that taste? Or what flavors are you noticing? Instead of you've had enough, ask how is your tummy feeling right now? These questions help children tune into their internal experiences rather than focusing on external rules. Here's a crucial distinction. Avoid language that creates shame around enjoyment. Don't say things like, I can't believe you're eating chocolate for breakfast, or that's way too much sugar. Instead, try, you're really enjoying that chocolate, aren't you? Or your body seems to want something sweet right now. This validates their experience rather than making them feel wrong for having it. When children ask for more sweets, resist the urge to automatically say no. Instead, help them check in with their bodies. Let's pause for a moment. What's your tummy telling you? Or how would your body feel if it had another piece? This teaches them to make decisions based on their external permission. If your child does eat to the point of feeling unwell, your response is crucial. Avoid I told you so language, like that's what happens when you eat too much. Instead, use it as a learning opportunity. Oh, your tummy doesn't feel comfortable. What do you think it's trying to tell you? Or that's your body giving you some information about what feels good and what doesn't. Now let's talk about handling other adults' comments, because this is where many parents feel most vulnerable. When someone says, shouldn't you limit how much they're having? You might respond with, we're helping them to learn to trust their body signals. It's been really effective for our family. Keep it brief and confident. You don't need to justify your approach to anyone. If a family member says something like, in my day, children didn't eat sweets whenever they wanted, you could say, we're following current research from pediatric dietitians. The approach has changed quite a bit based on what we know about child development. This acknowledges their perspective while standing firm in your decision. When discussing different food roles in our bodies, use inclusive language rather than hierarchical language. Instead of vegetables are good for you and sweets are bad for you, try vegetables help our bodies grow strong and sweets give us quick energy and taste wonderful. Our bodies need different things at different times. Here are some phrases that build body awareness. What sounds good to your body right now? How does your tummy feel after eating that? What is your body asking for? Let's check in with some hunger signals. These questions help children develop the internal awareness that it's at the heart of intuitive eating. Contrast this with phrases that undetermined body awareness. Clean your plate, just 2 more bites, you can't be hungry, you just ate, or save room for dessert. These phrases teach children to ignore their internal cues in favor of external expectations. When modeling your own relationship with treats, use positive language. I'm really enjoying this chocolate, or this biscuit tastes lovely with my cup of tea. Avoid separate self-deprecation comments like, I'm being so naughty today, or I'll have to work this off at the gym. Your children are always listening and learning from how you talk about your own food choices. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. You don't need to get every phrase exactly right. What matters is the overall tone of curiosity, respect, and trust that you bring to your food conversations with your child. So we've talked about letting go of control and trusting our children with food choices. But I want to shift our focus now to what we're actually building towards, because this isn't just about Halloween sweets or even food in general. It's about raising children who trust their bodies, who can tune into their internal signals, and who have the confidence to make decisions based on what feels right for them. Body awareness is one of the most valuable life skills we can teach our children, and it starts with food. When children learn to recognize hunger, fullness, and satisfaction, they're developing the foundation for understanding all their body signals. The principles we've discussed, the trust we're building. The principles we've discussed, the trust we're building, the body awareness we're fostering, these become the foundation of how your family approaches food throughout the entire year. And that's where the real transformation happens. Think about it for a moment. Your child's birthday party is coming up and there's going to be cake, sweets, and all sorts of treats. Instead of feeling anxious about it, instead of trying to control their intake or making deals like, you can have cake if you eat your dinner first, you can approach it with the same calm confidence you've developed around Halloween. You know your child has the skills to listen to their body, to enjoy the celebration food, and to naturally return to balance afterwards. Christmas morning arrives with selection boxes and chocolate coins. Easter brings chocolate eggs, and summer brings ice cream vans and fair treats. Each of these occasions becomes an opportunity to reinforce the same message. Food is meant to be enjoyed. Your body is trustworthy, and there's no such thing as being bad for eating something delicious. But it's not just special occasions where this approach transforms. This approach transforms family life. It's the everyday moments that you really matter. When you're doing the weekly shop and your child asks for a packet of biscuits, instead of automatically saying no or negotiating conditions, you might simply add them to the trolley. When those biscuits are at home, available alongside other snack options, they lose their special power. They become just another food choice rather than a forbidden treasure. I know this might sound terrifying. Won't my house become overrun with junk food? You might be thinking. But here's what actually happens when you remove it. Children stop hoarding them mentally. When my friend started keeping a small selection of sweets in a kitchen drawer alongside other snacks, her children barely noticed them most days. They'd choose fruit, cheese, crackers, or yes, sometimes a sweet. But the sweet wasn't more exciting than the other options because it wasn't forbidden. This approach to grocery shopping requires a mindset shift. Instead of dividing your list into healthy and unhealthy foods, thinking about providing variety and choice, you're still the parent making decisions about what comes into your home. That's your part of your job. Oh my God. So here we are at the end of our journey together, and I hope you're feeling a bit different about Halloween than when we started. Because what we've really been talking about isn't just sweets or even food. It's about trusting our children and breaking cycles that have been passed down through generations. The key message I want you to take away is this. Your children are born with incredible wisdom about their bodies, and our job isn't to override that wisdom with rules and restrictions. It's to support them, guide them, and trust them to make choices that feel right for them. This Halloween, I challenge you to try this approach. Watch what happens when you step back from control and step into trust. Observe how your children respond when sweets aren't forbidden fruit, but simply another food choice. Notice how the drama and conflict around treats begins to fade when scarcity is no longer driving the obsession. Remember, you've got this. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Real Mummy podcast. Remember, every mum's journey is unique and you are doing an amazing job. Please be sure to head over to our website at www.realmummypodcast.com to stay up to date with the latest episodes and dive into our recent blog articles filled with even more wisdom and stories. We absolutely love connecting with our listeners, so don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Real Mummy Podcast. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, and become part of our supportive mum community. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you got a topic you want covered? Do you have a guest you'd love to hear from? Reach out to us through our website or social media. Your input is invaluable and helps us to create the content that matters most to you. Thank you for being part of the Real Mummy Podcast family. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind to yourself, and remember, you're never alone on this journey.